So today we're going to do the biggest ranking video we've ever done on this channel, and that's rank every film from director Wes Craven. Let's do this. How's it going, everybody? Welcome again to the Cobwebs channel, where we're dusting off the classics. We talk about Blu-rays, we do reviews, rankings with a focus on the past. My name is Daniel, and I'm super excited for this video because it's kind of a response video to a challenge. Garrett over at the Born to Be Rad channel, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels I discovered recently. I've become a big fan, and he's a super nice guy. He put out a video ranking every Wes Craven movie, and at the end of it, he talked about how he hasn't seen a lot of other YouTubers do this, and he invited other YouTubers to follow him on this journey, and I love Wes Craven, so I decided to do just that. So I'm going to be ranking 22 of Wes Craven's directed films. The only films I'm not including is a TV movie called Chiller, because I can't find it available to watch in any kind of decent quality. He also directed certain adult films under the name Abe Snake, and I haven't seen them. No, seriously, guys, I really haven't. So I'm not going to be including any of that, but every other film Wes Craven directed, we're going to be talking about 22 films. Let's get going with number 22. Now, at the bottom of this ranking is actually the only Wes Craven movie I would say I truly don't like. Every other Wes Craven movie, even if it's a bit subpar, I find things to enjoy about. But my bottom of the list is Swamp Thing from 1982. This is an adaptation of a DC Comics character. I'm not familiar with the comic book or the character really outside of this movie. But going into this movie, I still expected it to be a horror film, and it's really not. It is an action-adventure superhero film, and a really poor version of it. The action is very poorly done. The Swamp Thing and other monster characters, I find them incredibly off-putting looking. I'm really not a fan of the character designs or execution. I'm a fan of rubber suit monster movies. I love 50s monsters, but Swamp Thing, and especially the villain monster at the end, look pretty bad to my eyes, and there's just nothing about this thing that I enjoy. At number 21 is The Hills Have Eyes, Part 2 from 1984. Did I scare you there for a second? Yeah, this is the sequel to Wes Craven's classic survivalist 70s horror film. And in the case of this, they really just took The Hills Have Eyes and turned it into a Friday the 13th movie. It's a pretty generic slasher with generic slasher fodder characters, which is not really what the original film was at all. I think this film is kind of enjoyable. I certainly don't hate it. Its biggest crime is it's just generic and kind of boring. But my favorite thing about this movie is it's packed with a bunch of fake out scares, and the best one is at the beginning when a guy puts on a Halloween mask to sneak into a house to scare his girlfriend who is blind? Doesn't make much sense, but hey, that's Hills Have Eyes Part 2 for you. At number 20 is kind of a Wes Craven classic, and it's the one that I just cannot get into, and that's The Serpent and the Rainbow from 1988. This is a voodoo zombie horror film, and I'm a fan of voodoo zombie kind of movies, whether you're looking at Plague of the Zombies from Hammer or White Zombie with Bela Lugosi, stuff like that. I Walked with a Zombie from Val Lewton. This one's starring Bill Pullman, and it's pretty well done in a lot of ways. It's well made. I just find it really boring. I can never get on this movie's wavelength, and the only cool visual horror sequence in the movie is a dream scene, and that's really all you get. So I like Bill Pullman's performance. It's certainly well made, but it's just not a movie for me. At number 19 is the first television film to hit the list, and that is Stranger in Our House from 1978, or as it's more commonly known, Summer of Fear. This is a fun movie starring Linda Blair as a teenage girl whose cousin comes to live with her family when her parents pass away, and she is prettier than Linda Blair. She's more charming. She steals her boyfriend. Her parents start to like her more than Linda Blair, and Linda Blair figures, well, she's probably a witch, and maybe she's right. It's just kind of funny how perfect a teen movie fantasy this is, where, hey, if there's somebody who's cooler than you that's starting to steal people away out of your life, then she's probably evil and trying to hex them or something like that. It's goofy. It's kind of fun. I don't like it as much as some other people do, but I find it enjoyable, and it's kind of a good movie to watch in the middle of the night when you can't sleep, which is how I watch this, because it's so low-key, it's chill, but it's enjoyable. At number 18 is a television movie that I actually think is kind of underrated, and that's Invitation to Hell from 1984. This tells the story of a family who moves into a rich neighborhood for the first time as they're starting to experience some upward mobility in their class, and there's a country club in the town that everybody joins, and the family wants to join it, but the dad doesn't. He thinks there's something creepy about how everyone's pushing them to join this club. I find the mystery of this movie pretty enjoyable. I like the suburban atmosphere of it, and the opening 2 minutes dance is like one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my life. And the end of the movie gets really ambitious, I thought. It kind of pushes outside of its budget limitations, but I respected that they went for it. It also co-stars Kevin McCarthy from the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And for a story that's about a group of people trying to push a small minority into conforming, that's good casting. Next up at number 17, this is Music of the Heart from 1999. This is Wes Craven's furthest departure from the normal kinds of movies he makes. This is nothing but a drama, a straight drama starring Meryl Streep as a teacher in a low-income inner-city school, and she's a music teacher. And so it's kind of that typical like Dead Poet Society kind of inspiring teacher kind of movie. But I thought it took some different directions that I enjoyed. Like Meryl Streep is not that typical inspiring teacher character. She's kind of rough around the edges. She's a little bit mean at times. She just felt more real than I expected her to feel in this movie. Her performance is very good. It's just a pretty solid movie, but it's definitely not the best of one of those inspiring teacher movies. It's very flatly directed by Wes Craven. You can't really see him in this movie at all, but Meryl Streep gives a good performance, and I do think it's a pretty good movie. At number 16 is Vampire in Brooklyn from 1995. This is starring Eddie Murphy as a vampire, and he really is a Dracula stand-in. And surprisingly enough, I thought Eddie Murphy was really good as a version of Dracula. He's incredibly charming and handsome and alluring, just all those kind of gothic vampire qualities. He's got some kind of African accent that I thought stood in very well for kind of a Transylvanian accent. You know, it gives you that kind of Bela Lugosi-like feel to it. It's just a solid vampire movie. I think where this movie really missteps is sometimes they can't help but make Eddie Murphy be the typical Eddie Murphy in that he has to dress up as multiple characters and do silly impersonations. It works in the story because it's the vampire pretending to be other people, like shape-shifting kind of, but it's the one thing about the movie that's goofy. I would prefer if this was just a straight vampire movie with Eddie Murphy being an awesome vampire, and that's most of the movie. Just missteps a couple of times, but overall, I think this is kind of an underrated Wes Craven movie. I do enjoy it. Next up at number 15, this is a movie I just cannot hate, no matter how many times people tell me I should, and that is Cursed from 2005. Now look, this movie had a disaster of a production history. It went through multiple different versions. It went through multiple different versions of the cast. It had so much studio interference. It's kind of a miracle that this turned into a movie at all when it had so much trouble behind the scenes. This is not the movie Wes Craven wanted to make. It's not the awesome werewolf movie he wanted to make, but it's a werewolf movie with that post-Scream kind of feel, and I'm a big fan of that post-Scream kind of feel. It's starring Christina Ricci. I cannot hate a movie starring Christina Ricci ever, and it's got a good supporting cast of like Jesse Eisenberg, and I really liked his arc of a friendship with the bully who was bullying him. That relationship I thought really worked pretty well in this movie. I thought it was pretty sweet. There honestly is a few cool werewolf scenes. There's some CGI transformation messiness, but there's some cool werewolf stuff in this as well. I overall like Cursed. It's a mess, but I think it's pretty good. At number 14 is the first movie in Wes Craven's biggest franchise within the movies he directed, at least, and that is Scream 3 from 2000. I'm definitely a fan of the Scream franchise, and while this is my least favorite of Wes Craven's movies, I still think it's a really enjoyable film. I do enjoy all of the Hollywood stuff, all of the meta, behind-the-scenes movie making. I mean, that seems like kind of an obvious way to take it after Scream 2. Like, let's get into the actual making of these stab movies. It's definitely the goofiest and the funniest of the Scream movies, so it's the one that I take the least seriously, but it's just super entertaining, and I like Patrick Dempsey's addition, and I like that the latest two Scream movies at least, they established that Patrick Dempsey's character stuck around in Sydney's life, and that kind of makes this movie better as well. At number 13 is a movie a lot of people hate, but I just don't. I can't help but really like it. That's My Soul to Take from 2010. Almost his last movie. He got one more after this. My Soul to Take is a slasher film. It is about a group of teenagers who all have the same birthday, and there's some kind of curse going on, and this slasher character named The Ripper is picking them off one by one. This movie it's crazy. It's got an insane script. The dialogue between the teenagers is wildly unrealistic. No teenagers ever talk like this. There's a bizarre power structure within the high school, like it's like The Godfather or something. It's really, really strange. Some people think it's a bad script, but I think it's a hyper stylized script. It's Wes Craven just kind of going nuts, going deeply unrealistic. The kill scenes are gnarly. I mean, he's called the Ripper for a reason. These are some nasty, nasty kills. I just think it's really weird and interesting. And Wes Craven's a guy who very rarely played it safe. I would say the only movie he ever really played it safe with was The Hills Have Eyes 2, where he's just like, I'll do a Friday the 13th kind of thing. But most of the time, he's just really going for something bold. And that's definitely the case with this movie. I feel Wes Craven just really letting loose in My Soul to Take. And I think it's really, really cool. At number 12 is a movie that I thought would place a lot higher for me because I really like it, but I just realized there's 11 other movies that I like more, and that's The Hills Have Eyes. I think this is a really good movie. It's his second real theatrical film. It's about a family whose motorhome breaks down in the middle of a desert. It's a real nightmare situation. There's no phones. There's no one around to help them, and they're hunted down by an insane family of cannibals. It's got a great cast, including Dee Wallace. I think the cannibal characters are really interesting. The way their family works is very interesting. It's a brutal, scary movie, and I think it's really, really good. I'm honestly surprised it's this low. The Hills Have Eyes is an effectively scary movie. I think it's really good. At number 11, just barely missing the top 10, is Scream 4 from 2011. Wes Craven's final film, a really good Scream movie. It's very slickly directed, very entertaining. It brings back returning cast who are still excellent. It brings in new characters that I really like I really like Kirby, big fan of her. It's one of my favorite and killer reveals in the whole Scream franchise. In fact, I would say it's second, so I really, really dig that. At number 10 is a movie that's pretty related to The Hills Have Eyes, and that is The Last House on the Left from 1972. Wes Craven's first film, and it really feels like a horror movie made by a guy who doesn't know what a horror movie is. And that's exactly what happened. Wes Craven was not a horror fan. He didn't really know what to do. And he's like, hey, this is horrifying, right? It's related to The Hills Have Eyes because they're two movies about what are normal, average people capable of? What violence and depravity are they capable of if they are pushed? And this is a movie about two parents whose teenage daughter and her friend are brutally kidnapped, assaulted, and murdered. And what are these parents capable of in order to get revenge for this horrifying act? It's kind of a remake of The Virgin Spring from Ingmar Bergman. It's just a brutal, scary, deeply affecting movie, but it also has so many weird choices to it. Like, it's got comedy relief. The killer characters are incredibly humanized to a degree that you would almost never see in a movie like this. Like, they're funny sometimes. There's a scene after they murder somebody where they feel this feeling of remorse, like they feel sick about what they've just done. Like, that's really unusual for a film like this. And then it's got bouncy folk music on the soundtrack. It's got goofy cops. It's just a movie that's consistently weird and interesting and upsetting and affecting. I've seen a lot of boring 70s exploitation movies, drive-in movies that really just feel like they're made to throw on a drive-in screen and nobody's going to pay attention. This is not one of those movies. It is consistently engaging. I honestly think The Last House on the Left is a pretty great movie. At number 9, it's just a really slick, perfectly made thriller from 2005. That is Red Eye, starring Rachel McAdams and Cillian Murphy. What starts out as kind of this meet cute kind of thing where they meet at an airport and then they're sitting together on the airplane, turns into this frightening thriller when Cillian Murphy reveals that he is there to force Rachel McAdams to do something for him. And if she doesn't do it, he's got some people that are going to murder her father. It's just brutally intense, super slick, great performances. It's like pretty short. I think it's barely 90 minutes long, and it's just so effective. It just really shows what a solid director Wes Craven really was. At number 8 is kind of a movie that I watched for the first time leading up to this. I mean, I'd seen it once before while hanging out with friends, not giving it a ton of attention, but really excited to have really seen it, and that is Shocker from 1989. Now, when Wes Craven created Freddy Krueger, he actually lost the rights to that character, and he didn't make any sequels, at least for a long time. And Shocker was his attempt to make a new Freddy Krueger in the form of Horace Pinker, a serial killer who was killed in an electric chair and now can possess people and television sets. It's just a really weird 80s slasher that's incredibly entertaining. Again, Very well directed. It's got great soundtrack. It's got really over-the-top fun performances, including from the lead character played by Peter Berg. Yes, the guy who directs all those Mark Wahlberg movies like Lone Survivor. Really weird part of his career. And all the stuff with his girlfriend, those kind of visions, those are really visually interesting. So I think this movie is super fun. I think the only real problem with it is it's got like 3 different climaxes. The final climax is definitely the best, but it feels like it ends 3 times. So maybe a little bit too long, but I'm definitely a big fan. At number 7 is probably my pick for the most underrated Wes Craven movie, and that is Deadly Blessing from 1981. This is a really unique, strange horror film about a Amish-like community. They're technically called Hittites that live out in farmland, and there's some local people that live there as well, and there's conflict between them. The Hittites are religious extremists, and they believe in something called the incubus that they're always terrified of. So it's partially a cult horror movie, but then it's also partially supernatural. It also feels almost like a giallo by the end. It's got a really weird twist. It's just consistently strange, and I love Ernest Borgnine's performance as Isaac, the lead Hittite guy. And it's also got an early performance from Sharon Stone. So if you skipped out on this one, because I think a lot of people have, man, I really recommend it. Check it out. Number 6, just outside of the top 5, is the chance when Wes Craven finally got to make a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel. That's New Nightmare from 1994. New Nightmare feels like a bit of a dry run for Scream, and it's an incredibly meta film about horror movies. It's not about Freddy Krueger, it's about the people that made the Nightmare on Elm Street film. So Wes Craven, Robert Englund, and Heather Langenkamp all play themselves, the creators of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. And this is about, well, what if Freddy Krueger was based on a real dream demon who takes the form of Freddy Krueger? Like, the imagination becomes reality. It's pretty interesting. It's not one I watch as often as a lot of other Nightmare on Elm Street sequels. I think I do prefer just a straight Nightmare on Elm Street movie most of the time, but it's definitely better than a lot of the sequels. It's of pretty high quality, and I just think it's a really interesting movie, and I'm definitely a huge fan. Cracking into the top 5 is Scream 2 from 1997. Just a perfectly made sequel. I absolutely love how this came out just a year after the original Scream, so all the actors look exactly the same. They're still perfectly in their prime. Just feels like a perfect direct continuation from the first movie. You can watch them back to back and just have a perfect time watching movies. It's just very well made. It's incredibly intense, maybe even more intense than the first one. And I really love all the stuff between Gale and Dewey. They're super cute in this movie. Their relationship's one of my favorite things about this franchise, and I think it's at its peak in Scream 2. At number 4 is Deadly Friend from 1986. What? He's got this movie this high? Yes, I do. I am such a giant fan of Deadly Friend. I think it is so much fun. I mean, I love 80s teen horror movies that take place in suburbia. Fright Night is obviously the king of those for me. And Deadly Friend has that Fright Night-like feel. It's, again, a really weird movie. Wes Craven made a lot of weird movies. And Deadly Friend is about a genius teenage boy who invented a robot friend who follows him around. And he starts to fall in love with the girl next door, played by Christy Swanson. And when something happens to her, he uses some weird Frankenstein robot kind of technology to bring her back to life. It's very weird. It's very cheesy. I think it's wildly entertaining. And I really like the main characters. I love the robot. And I love the basketball scene. How can you not love that? And the end of the movie makes absolutely no sense. And a lot of people think it's terrible because of that, but I love the end of this film. It's such a WTF moment, and it's also a practical effect that I think looks awesome. At number 3 is a fantastic 90s horror film from Wes Craven. That's The People Under the Stairs from 1991. Man, I absolutely love this movie. And it's a movie that got so much better for me on a second watch when I got the Scream Factory Blu-ray. It's about a little boy named Fool in an inner city neighborhood who breaks into a house, and it turns out the house is run by these 2 siblings who are insane and are keeping children under their stairs. And it's like a reverse home invasion movie. It's just the kind of movie you're just never going to see. Wes Craven made so many unique films, and there's so much bizarre stuff going on between the villains, these siblings in the house. And it's also got a really good message to it that's very organically woven through the story, like not clunkily delivered at all. It feels very natural and is a great message. At number 2, we're down to the top 2, and I think, these are going to be the top 2 on most people's list, and that is Scream from 1996. Scream is a movie that I just grow to love more and more the more I see it. Might be Wes Craven's best directed film. Has an incredible cast that's become so iconic to this day. One of the greatest opening scenes of all time. It's a movie that is so influential. An entire subgenre of the horror genre is post-Scream movies, post-Scream slashers. It created just an entire line of horror films, a line of horror films that I really like. Man, what can you say? Scream is just, it's fantastic. It's almost Wes Craven's best movie, but it's definitely not, because my number one is a super easy choice. I mean, I never for a second doubted exactly what my number one is. It's my second or third favorite horror film of all time, and that's A Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984. It's maybe the best slasher film ever made. It's just amazing to me that Wes Craven is so perfect in this movie. It didn't take any sequels to perfect him. He's so perfectly formed this terrifying character with a perfect, iconic design. But the thing I really love about this movie is I love the protagonists. I love the teenagers. They're all so well humanized. Even Rod, who's definitely the D-bag of the group, he seems just like a jerk. He is really well humanized. And when you get to the end of his journey within this movie, you feel really bad for him. All the actors, I think, are really, really strong. And it's got one of the greatest scores in the entire horror genre. This movie is just what Wes Craven does best. He makes weird, unique movies, but never more successful. Never did his weird, unique eccentricities just come together more perfectly or more commercially to just make a perfect movie. This is the Wes Craven film, one of my favorites of all time. Wes Craven, he's just one of my favorite directors. I love so many of his movies, as you can see. When he passed away, it's actually to date the celebrity death that affected me the most. It just really, really saddened me. He seemed like a wonderful person, and I'm such a huge fan. Let me know down in the comments, what's your Wes Craven ranking, if you can do that. But if you're not quite up to that challenge, give me your top 5. What's your top 5 Wes Craven movies? Let me know down below. If you enjoyed this, dust off the like and subscribe button so you can follow me and we can talk more about movies in the future. And check out Garrett at the Born to Be Rad channel. I've also got that link down below. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back later, but for now, go have some fun.